Good morning. It's been about 4 years that I've come to live here in Boulder and participate fully with the Boulder Zen Center. And I feel that I'm still searching for, and I think that's not going to come to an end, but I'm searching for how to establish a practice with you that can hold on a daily basis and throughout the year in terms of both, supporting you in your mindfulness and meditation practice, but also in terms of how to bring this practice fruitfully into your daily life. It's just, how does this work? Because we're not monastics. We kind of have to, each for ourselves, establish a kind of system of activities, a system of practice activities that support us and support our deepest intentions and so forth. So what form or shape this can take and how the Boulder Zen Center needs to evolve to support you, I don't know. It's just an experiment. It's an open question. So one thing I've done is to dedicate the fall to offering what I've started to call practice courses, and I used the material of my book, The Path of Aliveness, to structure certain topics like what is transformative practice, what is freedom from suffering, what is wisdom, what is compassion, and so forth. And many of you have participated, and I hope it was fruitful. So now I have this question, does this continue? Do we continue to do courses in the fall? And what does it mean to do a course? And so anyway, well, now I kind of decided, I want to do another course in the fall. And in searching for what the topic might be, I landed on the idea of exploring habits with you, So anyway, the working title in my mind is Transforming Habits for the Fall course. It's going to start, I think, in October 4th. It runs through November 9th. If you're interested, you can save the dates. And then yesterday I asked in the kitchen residents, what would you like me to talk about? And Josh said, well, why don't you give a preview of the course? And so, okay, I don't know. I'd like to. I don't know, it's not a preview of the course, but it's a certain aspect that is alive in me right now that I would like to bring up and start to introduce maybe this idea of what I mean by transforming habits or working with habits. Why would we want to give attention to habits? I mean, aside from Buddhism, right? It's like we all know that we have certain dysfunctional habits. Habits that don't support our life. The way we feel we want to and should live our life. And if you bring in some Buddhist vocabulary here, it would be habits of body, speech, and mind. They're physical habits. They're habits of speech, of communication, how you talk to yourself. That could be pretty dysfunctional, right? how you talk to others. That could be somewhat dysfunctional. Habits of speech, habits of mind, how you, often in our society it's like how you think, right? There's positive thinking, that's supposed to be good. That's a good habit, positive thinking. But it's not just thinking, it's how you hold and practice attention. What you believe to be true about yourself and the world. This would be views. What you intend. These are all aspects of the mind, habits of mind. So anyway, habits of body, speech, and mind. So when you look at it this way, it's your whole life. Again, some of these habits of body, speech, and mind are dysfunctional. They don't support a fully flourishing life. Not only your own personal life, but also our collective life. So, for that reason, it's useful, almost necessary, to examine your habits and see if you can get into the texture of these habits and participate in change, make it more functional, make it more aligned with your inmost intentions. Because some of the dysfunction comes from that we have learned certain habits over the course of our years and they're not fully aligned with our inmost intentions. They kind of like get us off the path that we want to be on. Now, every human being has this problem. It's not special to you. It's like everyone's doing well and I have this problem of like dysfunctional habits. Yeah. There's a real, there are real issues here that I see, and why so many of us feel so stuck in this arena is like we want to make changes. That's happens, every New Year's or something like, and it lasts for a couple of days. But we kind of are, it's uncanny. It's like we make mistakes in what we want to change. Or we're confused about what it is that actually needs to change. And we're also confused about how to go about making changes. Like where are the points where you can actually make the changes? And one thing that's really necessary about gaining more clarity in that is to understand what habits are and how they function. Well, that's what the course is going to be about, so I'm not going to do that right now. But just one thing. One thing that is absolutely transformed my understanding of my own living existence is when I understood that habits are empty. Now, this word emptiness is complicated in Buddhism. Like we get easily confused about it. It's like, oh, it's like nothing or void or meaningless or something. No, but empty means something like insubstantial, not lasting in a substantial way. subject, you could say, subject to change and impermanence. Now, for the topic of habits, this is fascinating and it's not difficult to understand. It's if you just remember this, habits are repeated action. We would have to take another thing there to give a fuller definition. It's repeated action that has been automated. You don't have to make conscious effort anymore to repeat the action. It's sort of like repeats itself. But the way you automate a habit is by repeating an action. And that's it. And that means as soon as you stop repeating the action, the habit collapses. You understand? This is dramatic. I mean, we think our habits they are substantial. They have a hold on us. We can't get away from them. They are like ingrained, or whatever we say, right? They're a thing, they're happening. But they're not. They're just repeated action. And if you stop repeating the action, the habit is gone. Right? You agree? It can't be any other way. How can it be so difficult to stop? But it's nevertheless true that the habit is insubstantial. It collapses immediately. There's another lesson here. Is like if you want to establish a wholesome functional habit about anything, right? All you have to do is repeat an action. There's not more to it. Let that sink in. All you have to do is repeat an action and keep going. And you will be transformed. You will actually automate the habit, and it's going to be happening on autopilot. At a certain point, you don't have to give much effort to it. If you heard this, I've heard this somewhere, and you may have heard it somewhere, and then I looked for who said this, and it's unclear. This saying, sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. This is how it was told to me, but you could say reap an identity. Sow an identity, reap a destiny. Repeated action creates your identity and determines what your life is like. And when you really get that, it is clear what to do. It is choosing the actions that are beneficial and wholesome, as we would say in Buddhism, and repeat them. So, now as I'm because I landed on this idea, okay, the course should be about habits, and I start studying. How do I study? I study my own habits. Of body, speech, and mind. And I am looking for ways to deepen my understanding how this functions. So in that kind of study, I came across a simple story. So the story is there's a woman who is grossly overweight, 100 pounds, and she is starting to be concerned about how this being overweight, a habit of the body, is starting to impact her health. And she adopts the question, what would a healthy person do? And then, in every situation of her life, she has a little decisional map. What would a healthy person do? So I read the story and I imagined myself, okay, I'm at a buffet. What would a healthy person put on his or her plate and then eat? Or I recently was in an airport and, there's people coming out of some it's funny how airports are. It's like lots of people and they're all like funneled through like doors and gates, and so so you're coming to an escalator and next to the escalator is a flight of stairs. What would a healthy person do? Well, most people are like comfortably riding up the escalator. What would a healthy person do? Oh, maybe the healthy person needing some exercise would pick up their suitcase and walk up the stairs. Little decisional map. You don't have to do it, but you could do it, etc. You get the picture, right? So I'm reading the story, and then I immediately made a translation, and the question arose in my mind: what would a Buddha do? If I want to expand this decisional map from just being about health to all the dimensions of my life, all dimensions of body, speech, and mind, I need to zoom out, and I need a bigger concept than healthy person. And so what is the big concept in Buddhism that gives orientation? It's like, oh, Buddha. What would a Buddha do? Okay, so I started. I started to hold the question, and I love it. I'm building a habit right now, and I'm hoping I will never give it up. What would a Buddha do? I mean, I don't know. You know your habits. I don't want to speak for you, but I want you to, in my speaking, I want to find the texture of your own life. So, let's pick some habit, that is, considered universally dysfunctional. Let's say procrastination. Right? You have some job, you have some task, you have a project that you, well, it's funny, right? That you want to do, that you should do, already there. It's like, I should do it. Do I want to do it? Well, I do want to do it, but why am I not doing it? And you find some off-ramp to do something else. Watch some YouTube videos or do your favorite activity, or, and soon enough, an hour is gone, and then it's time to make dinner. I didn't get to it. All right, so let's go back. You're there. You kind of, that thought arises. I need to do this. I should do this. I want to do this. And you feel this little friction in your flow of acting and thinking, where you feel drawn to doing it, but you also feel drawn to not doing it. It's normal, right? It's we all know that. So in that moment, you insert the question, what would a Buddha do? Okay, one example. Another example, something happens and you get annoyed. You don't like what somebody did, you don't like what's happening. I don't know, while you're driving a car, somebody who just like leaps out and walks across the street. Oh my God, this really shouldn't happen. Nothing happened, right? You just stop, but you're annoyed. Okay. You notice that it's not particularly healthy to be annoyed and dwell on it. Like start some sort of thought train of complaint, or, feel this stress level rise in your body, and you notice that it's not particularly functional. So again, you notice this little friction in your flow of action and thought, and then you remember the question, what would a Buddha do? Would a Buddha launch into like bitching and complaining? Now, something that I find absolutely fascinating here is like, let me speak about myself. I know what a Buddha would do. How is this possible? So let me just. This for me. This is just an experiential fact. I know what a Buddha would do. It is not difficult. I don't always do what a Buddha would do, but it's not difficult to know what a Buddha would do. I wonder why that is. Now, we're all practicing Buddhists. That's why I can say this. Maybe I can generalize and say we all know what a Buddha would do. But if you've never heard about Buddhism, then you wouldn't necessarily. So in my case, I've taken the precepts. We have a ceremony every year where people take the precepts. You make a commitment to basically common sense guidance for how to be a decent human being. Not to kill, not to take what is not given, not to misuse sexuality, not to intoxicate body and mind, not to steal, not to denigrate others, not to elevate the self, not to be possessive, not to harbor ill will, not to stray from the proven path. To commit. Okay. So I've done that. I studied the Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right action, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right meditation, right? I've reflected on this. I have a meditation practice every day. I have a mindfulness practice. I study what my views are. I reflect on my intentions. I notice, when speech is functional and dysfunctional and causes harm, etc. I study the two truths without going into that. Maybe for you, everything you heard about Buddhism, it's kind of accumulates. You've tried it on, like clothes, how they fit you. And it all kind of is present actually in one unseparated felt sense. So if you know what all these teachings are pointing to, and we could call this what they're pointing to, we just call that Buddha. So there's something powerful here, because if I'm in a situation like I just painted, like ordinary situations, like where I'm about to procrastinate or where I'm about to give in to my annoyance, if I had to like hold present to myself all these teachings, it's too late. Like, what applies here? From the Eightfold Path or the precept, what applies here? Let me think about it. That would be an off-ramp in itself, and then it's time for dinner. But you can trust this, like what has already clarified itself in your practice, in your intentions. This is all present when you are holding this question with some kind of sincerity. What would a Buddha do? So you know. Plus, there's just common sense stuff, which we assume is also part of a Buddha. You know, the stuff that mother told you to say please and thank you and eat your vegetables, I mean. Okay. So, now, I find this, I'm getting nerdy about this kind of stuff, so bear with me, please. What happens when you are at this, in this decision, there's this decisional fork in your life, to procrastinate or not to procrastinate? This is the question. And this is an instance of mindfulness practice that you notice that there is this decisional fork. That you are present enough to notice it. And then a little pause, a little space opens up there. And this space is now, takes the shape of the question, what would a Buddha do? And if you allow that pause, this empty shape of a moment, to be filled with that question, clarity can ensue from there. You know, often people make a distinction between reacting and responding, right? It's like, what is that difference? Reacting, I think, when it's spoken about in this way, reacting is sort of like there's a trigger, and immediately there is a habitual reaction. There's that groove that lets you just, immediately do that. And then when people hold response against that as an alternative, it's like the response requires actually this, and it's not long, this little pause, this mini pause, this openness in which you can have the clarity to align your action with your inmost intentions rather than with your ingrained habit. And this is usually how people speak about the distinction between reaction and response. In response, we have, I'm not sure this is true, but people feel like their will, their consciousness, their conscious participation is involved in choosing the action rather than, doing something on autopilot. But this is true. You need to try it out. Like if you can feel that pause a little bit, and now I'm saying, and fill it with what would a Buddha do, you'll feel you're responding to the situation more intentionally than just, going with your habit and reacting. Don't worry about it though. Don't worry about because it's hard, when you think about it, it's like, oh, there's all these instances where I'm not finding this pause and I'm just reacting. No. If you want to take something away from this talk, just do this. Try this out and just get interested in the question, what would a Buddha do? Mm-hmm. Don't worry about it. Just do it. it may not work for you, that's fine, and you drop it, but anyway. Okay, so I got pretty excited about it. So I told my wife, Sophie, I told her, hey, I found this question, what would a Buddha do? She said, oh, is that why you're so nice to me? I'm like, yeah, probably it's got something to do with it. Well, I think this is partly just good storytelling. So anyway, but then she said, "Oh, that's like, what would Jesus do?" Mm-hmm. Now, because I'm just ignorant because I'm only recently became an American. I had no idea that there was something like, what would Jesus do? I had really no idea. And she said, oh yeah, people have bracelets and stickers. And I'm like, oh, okay. There's some wisdom. Same idea, right? I mean, clearly, my idea is not so novel. Phew. I thought I had found something extraordinary. It's already very, very ordinary. But what was even more surprising, when I stumbled onto the question, what would a Buddha do? I immediately had the idea that this, if you say Buddha, what could you say instead? You can say healthy person, you can say Buddha. So I had already thought about what would Jesus do. And in my reflection, I realized it's actually a little different. What Jesus would do and what Buddha would do. It's actually a little different. Or quite different. Depends. Now, this led me to another reflection. It's like, why did I choose the question, what would a Buddha do? And why didn't I say, what would the Buddha do? Because when you hold the question, what would the Buddha do? You would call up in you the image of the historical Buddha. And you would search for the orientation in your action by comparing yourself with the historical Buddha, or what the Buddha do. Then I think there's the problem that we have all kinds of problems that the Buddha didn't have. So then how can you get guidance from the Buddha when he didn't have all kinds of, This is pretty significant. Because that means a lot. Like, the whole teaching of Buddhism is not a tradition that, stays the same. It has to evolve all the time. And where does it evolve? It evolves in you. And in me. And when we say, what would a Buddha do? Then we are actually implying something about ourselves. What would this person do if he or she was a Buddha? And we imply the possibility that that is possible. Now, is that the same? And I don't want to really go there, but let's just as a way to clarify what we're doing here when we're asking a question like this is this the same when we ask, what would Jesus do? Do we imagine that we are Christ when we ask, what would Jesus do? Or do we search for what the historical Jesus of Nazareth would have done and then try to get guidance from that? This is significant. This makes a real difference. So there's, in the question, what would a Buddha do, is a real openness to what a contemporary Buddha is. We have enough understanding of what a Buddha would do, but we're giving shape to something new, to something contemporary, to something that is exactly fitting for our life. I could go on and on about this, like, why am I not saying what would a bodhisattva do? I could say that, and it would bring something different. I'm not saying you shouldn't say what would a bodhisattva do. Maybe that is the better question for you. I'm just staying with what would a Buddha do for now. But okay. But when you just think about it conceptually for a while, here is a tradition that already takes the Buddha as a guidance and it evolves. And then it becomes what we now call Mahayana Buddhism. And those Buddhists that started the Mahayana had a problem. They said, like, oh, the Buddha, that's a little self-involved for our taste. Here's someone, doing practices, and it's all about self-liberation. I am transcending samsara to go to nirvana and find peace and happiness. And the Mahayanists say, no, we need to, this needs to be a wider vision. This has to be about all beings. The bodhisattva is the practitioner who, yes, works on their own liberation, but puts this liberation in the service of the liberation of every and all beings. Okay? So you can see in the history of Buddhism that already this orienting ideal was actually questioned and then changed. So what the word brings here is something that you have as a felt sense through your exploration. How you have used the teachings of Buddhism and other teachings to try to orient your life. So it's not important that there is this word Buddha here. This is why I'm speaking about it. There could be another orienting principle here. But it's important that when you have a phrase that you want to insert into this decisional moment, that it has power. That it does have orienting power. Like, to go back to the beginning of the story, how the idea of a healthy person had orienting power for this overweight woman who became concerned about her health. So I completely trust that you already know what a Buddha would do. Just the way I found in myself, to my own surprise, that I know. But if we want to think about it a little bit more and say, what is this Buddha business about? The vocabulary that I have landed on, and you don't have to land on it, you can find your own vocabulary, but the vocabulary that I have landed on is that being a Buddha is about freedom, wisdom, and compassion. And the more you clarify what that is, the more orienting power the word Buddha has for you. So, just to give you a quick example, freedom means freedom from suffering. here. And freedom from suffering is achieved through non-identification or non-attachment. So if you go back to the example of like a wave of annoyance arises in you, to not be identified with that wave of annoyance would be an inner skill to notice, that's mindfulness, to notice the sensations you call annoying arising in you. And then to not feel compelled to make your actions, to base your actions on that wave of annoyance that arises, but instead align it with your inmost intentions, despite the fact that you are annoyed. This would be freedom. I'm not annoyed. I'm not identified with this annoyance, which means I am not annoyed. There's just a wave of annoyance passing through my body and mind. Okay? This is the prerequisite for interrupting dysfunctional habits and building functional habits. And that's why, as Buddhist practitioners, we spend a lot of time on that, because it is the foundation. But there's another dimension here, and this is why this whole topic of habits is important. How does a Buddha manifest in the world? It's not manifesting through freedom. This Buddha person is not manifesting through the experience of freedom. The Buddha is manifesting through action, in the sense that uses that freedom to benefit all beings. Right? So the question of building habits is like, how will you use your freedom to interrupt and let collapse the dysfunctional habits of your life? And how do you build the habits of your life that are beneficial to you and others? So how to use that freedom. So if you look at Zazen practice is the practice of non-identification. How do you use that in the network of your many, many interrelated habits? Okay, let that be enough for today.